at the Faculty of Social Work. Maybe Vesna, you can say a bit more about what are you specifically teaching and making research on yourself. But the topic Vesna will address is the concept of social inclusion. So it's a bit of making a framework of our workshop today and tomorrow to in order to explain the basic concepts and how we understand it and what are different dimensions of social inclusion. This is what I want to say for the introduction, and with Vesna, the floor is yours, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this kind introduction. I will not spend time for introducing me on long, just to mention that currently I'm working on the gender equality plan for the University of Ljubljana. Otherwise, we have just also published a book on the right to abortion in Slovenia. So gender and the women's rights are quite a lot of my work, but I'm also working on welfare state and social inequalities and poverty. So this is enough for now, and I will share my presentation. I have already sent my presentation to the Utopia office, so you already have it, and it can be shared with participants. Just to see if you will manage to see the slides going on. Can you see the slides changing?
It's fine, it works, thank you.
It works? It
yes.
works, okay, yeah, great. I never know, so yeah. I will just start. I was invited to say something on the concept of social inclusion. Otherwise, I'm working in social welfare, so most of the cases I will present today will be from the social welfare field, not so much from the university, but as I can see on the schedule, there will also be speakers, especially Anna Javornik, that will emphasize the concept of social inclusion and apply it to the university. I don't think that we can speak about social inclusion without knowing what is actually the main causes and the reasons of people being excluded. I think that the terms of social inclusion, social cohesion, and social exclusion are actually interrelated. I will not lose a lot of words for introducing you to the history of the concept. I just want to emphasize that it is not the old one. It was coined, I think, in the 70s by one of the French ministers. He used it for the first time, and it came, the concept of the social exclusion came into the politics of the European Union in the 80s. I also want to emphasize here that this is also the time where when the European politics started to change and went away from the very traditional understanding of the welfare state, looking for the substitutes for the concept of the welfare state, mainly under the influence of Great Britain and United States neoliberal politics of the time. But I don't want to go deeper into this issue, as it is very complex, I would say. So the social exclusion was coined mainly for actually understanding what is the benefit. Most of the benefits of the concept of social exclusion is that it emphasizes the experiences of people that are living on the edges or the margins of the society. It tells us how actually people are in and out of the societies in which we are living. So this is, I think, what was the value added of the concept at the time when it was coined or used. It is also very important to emphasize that social inclusion is always a complex and multidimensional process. It is not a simple one. It is not that people are excluded in one dimension and they are okay in the others. It is always very complex and multidimensional process. It is also understood as the condition, kind of a barriers and processes that impede social inclusion. So here we also have a proof that we cannot speak about social inclusion without knowing what excludes people. It is also very strongly emphasized that social inclusion is a process through which individuals or groups are wholly or partially excluded from fully participating in all aspects of life of the society in which they live, on the grounds of their social identities such as age, gender, ethnicity, language, culture, and so on, ableism and economic, social disadvantages, and so on. Social inclusion may mean the lack of voice, the lack of recognition, or the lack of capacity for active participation. It may also mean exclusion from decent work, from assets, lands, opportunities, access to social services, or to the political representation. As we can see, it is really a complex, complex phenomenon. I'm sorry for my voice. I'm recovering from being ill in past weeks, not from COVID, but as you know, now we are very prone to catch a virus. So I will probably a little bit coughing in between my speech. Sorry for that. I also have to emphasize that it affects not just the social exclusion, does not affect just individuals, but always affects a society as a whole. Because, and this is also very important to know for the university, if the university is not capable to include everyone, to include all the employees, to include all the students and their potentials and potential students, it cannot fully develop its potentials because it actually loses what people can bring into the universities. So all the politics or the everyday practices of the universities that are exclusive of the potentials of people are actually damaging or bring the damage to itself. It is the university is only successful if it can include everyone into the functioning, because this is how actually it embraces all the potentials that people have, all the talents that people have, and so on. And it is the same with the society. If the society is leaving out individuals or groups of people, it is not so successful as it could be if it would be capable of including everyone. This is also something what relates to social inequalities, equalities and inequalities. As we also know from many of the studies, the most successful are societies that manage to include as much people as possible. The greater inequalities are the worst the country is actually doing. It is also that from the countries with the greater inequalities, actually the small group of people benefits the most. So this is also something what is worth of emphasizing. They also say some of the definitions of the term of social inclusion also relates this fact to the traditional welfare state. For example, Duffy is one of them. She was very much included into the European Union politics on social inclusion in the 80s. She was one of the first who also defined the term of social exclusion. And she says that actually people are excluded, already excluded if they are excluded from one of the dimensions of the welfare triangle. This is from the state, either from the civil society and the family, or from the markets. If they are excluded from two or all three dimensions of the welfare triangle, she says that actually this is a very serious exclusion, and it is a little chance to be so successful to manage people to include them back to the society. There is also another definition which is actually speaking about 4 dimensions and not just 3, but I will not go deeper into that. The second mentioning that sometimes the term exclusion is associated to poverty, which is not the best way to do it, because the poverty is likely to happen when people are excluded. It is a lot of chance that actually people which are excluded will fall into the poverty because they are lacking connection to the society. They are lacking information, they are lacking social capital and so on. So it is likely to fall into the poverty. But it is also false if we think that just poor people are excluded. There are also other groups that are, for example, experiencing discrimination, but are otherwise quite well excluded, for example, into the labor market. If I think now on people that are excluded because of their sexual orientation or sexual identity and so on, it can happen that they have good jobs and good education and so on, but they are totally absent from the participation in the society. I also want to bring your attention here to the term of intersectionality and to point to the fact that some people are holding more than one identities or the personal circumstances that are not seen as valuable for the society. For example, they are women and they also have the gay sexual identity, and they are disabled and so on. So the persons that are holding more than one of these undesirable, socially undesirable identities are more seriously excluded than the others. So this is also very important to know. And usually it is that when people are experiencing social exclusion, that through the time they are seen as incompetent in many of the fields. So somehow I think that these negative identities also somehow accumulate, I would say. It is also worth of knowing that people do not push themselves out, but they are pushed out. They do not just fall out. So actually it is not something, social exclusion, it's not something what could be attributed to the individual person, but it is something what is a consequence of what is happening in the society. There is also, when I was preparing for this presentation, it is also very strongly again and again emphasized that social exclusion is a process which have multiple layers, and it is not very simple to understand. I would say that the main barriers to social inclusion, I will say a little bit later, how the social inclusion is likely to be understood, or it is good to be understood. The main barriers in the processes are actually, I would say, social inequalities. Because greater the social, as I already emphasized, greater the social inequalities are, less the society is successful in the means of the well-being, not in the means of having rich people, for example. So there is more rich people in the societies that have greater social inequalities, but this is not the measure. The measure is actually well-being of all persons. The second point is actually the discrimination. More the society is not cohesive, and the social cohesion actually refers to the elements that bring and hold people together in the society. So more we have discrimination in the society, less people are bound together. Less they are cooperating, and also I would say that the social capital is concentrated in just small groups and does not apply to everyone. So I would say that the socially cohesive societies are actually the societies that have sense of belonging, participation, inclusion, recognition, and legitimacy. So the discrimination plays quite a strong role in social inclusion. Then it is also worth of mentioning the processes of individualization of responsibilities, which we are facing now. So people are states and the companies and the capital and so on is now more and more ascribe the responsibilities to individuals for their choices and for the ways of living and the identities and so on. And they do not take, the states do not take anymore so much responsibilities for the well-being of people. So I think that the individualization of responsibilities is a serious obstacle to the social inclusion. Then it is one, but I don't want to go deeper into that, even though it is a tempting topic, and this is the erosion of the welfare state, which we are facing for the last 40, 50 years, I would say. Also the privatization and marketization, because the privatization and marketization are actually eroding the universal access to the common good. Under the common good, I understand the services and the sectors that are crucial for our well-being, and this is the universal access to health, for example, to social protection, to cultural institutions, to education, and so on. So I think that these are the main barriers to be successful in this social inclusion. There is also quite a lot of critics of the concept of the social inclusion, but I will run out of time, so I have to go to the social inclusion part of my presentation. Again, as we said for social inclusion, that it is a process. Social inclusion cannot be understood otherwise than as a process. So it is not about particular programs, it is about the set of the measures and the politics that contribute to people that are excluded, to invite them back into the society. I think that this is very important to emphasize. The process of social inclusion is not only allowing people to access the services, even though this is very important, but to invite them to participate in the society. to play an active role in the society, to have a voice in the society, and so on, to have the access to resources and so on. So this is very important to emphasize. We cannot understand. Here are some quotes which are very important. I would say here that it is not it is also about the concept of the capabilities that was developed by Amartya Sen, which is also very important. So people can develop the capabilities in the inclusive society. We cannot. Sorry. Yeah. So what are I think that the major barriers to social inclusion? It is worth of knowing that social inclusion is only possible if the structural barriers are removed. So here again, I would again emphasize that it is not, social inclusion is not about social programs. It is about structural barriers that have to be removed. We can also be aware of the fact that social inclusion is not necessarily the flip side of the exclusion. So the very good example of this can be that if someone is unemployed, it is not necessarily that the person will be included when he or she will be employed. Because the exclusion is a complex and the multi-dimensional problem. So with the inclusion into the labor market, all other sides of the inclusion can still exist. It is also worth of mentioning that in current times, actually, to be included into the labor market does not mean that people come out of their very kind of dangerous individual situation, as the labor markets today do not prevent people to come out, for example, from poverty. We can also see that people that are the most marginalized are also can be abused inside the labor market. For example, there is one of the examples can be the working condition, for example, of the migrants. So quite a lot of times it can happen that the migrants that are devalued and are seen as the others in the society, especially if they are coming from the countries that are undervalued and are still are seen as uncivilized or barbaric countries and so on, in the sense of discrimination, I would say. It can also happen that the migrants are highly abused in the labor markets of the countries in which they are coming. We can see for example, we saw quite a lot of examples from Italy when the migrants lived in kind of camps which were closed and they were not allowed to go into the cities and so on. We can also see now the examples from Slovenia, when actually the migrant workers which are constructing the roads and the new train paths and so on, and the new railway paths, that they are living in kind of the closed communities and they are not allowed to go to the cities and so on. So I would say that with the simple inclusion into the labor market, even though the person was excluded because of the lack of resources and unemployment, it is not so simple that it is just the flip side of the exclusion. We can also see, for example, for the Roma people, this is also one of the good examples. even though they have the equal access, the Roma children have equal access to the education. They also have kind of a special attention in the schools and so on. But if they do not have water and electricity in their settlements, if the settlements are very basic without the basic infrastructures and so on, it is very difficult for Roma children that they will be successful at schools, even though they have schools good conditions to work. So we always have to be very careful, not allowing us that we will be kind of persuaded that with the simple social programs we can include people into the society. So this is what I want so strongly to emphasize. It is so important. The main barriers to social inclusion are structural and not individual. It is actually very important to speak about the inclusive society. I would say also that we have to ask ourselves about the inclusive university. So what is the inclusive university? One of the United Nations documents speaks about the inclusive society and the society for all, which is understood as the society of all, also speak about the elements for creating an inclusive society. So what is the inclusive society? The first point is that this is the society which respects for all human rights, freedoms, and the rule of law. Every member of the society, no matter what his or her economic resources, political status, or social standing, must be treated equally in this society. I think that this is very, very important. It is also that we have to maintain security for all individuals in this society and not just for some of them. To create an inclusive society, it is critical that all members are able and are motivated to participate in civic, social, economic, and political activities, both on local and on a national level. A society where most members, if not all, feel that they are playing a part, have access to their basic needs and so on, are certainly more cohesive than the societies that cannot provide participation. The existence of a strong civil society is fundamental for active participation and making public policies and institutions accountable. We all know that in some of the countries, including, I would say, Slovenia at this time, are not embracing the activities of the civil society, or sometimes they also strongly attack some parts of the civil society. The strong civil society also fosters respect for the rights, dignity, and privileges of all people, while assuming that they fulfill their responsibilities in the society. In order to encourage all-inclusive participation, there must be universal access to public infrastructure and the facilities. This is very, very important because the common good, this is what I would say, the common good. The common good is very important to develop all the potentials and talents that people have. And this also means that we have the universal access to healthcare, to public school, to clinics, to social services, that we all have water supplies and sewage and all the infrastructure that we need. But it is also important to have the access to public libraries, to community centers, to sports facilities, and so on. So I think that this is the broad sense of the public good, which allows us to develop the talents and our aspirations, but also to connect with other people, to be with them, to associate with them, because this allows us to have the equal access to public information. The social capital is actually generating the trust. So if we associate one with the other, we are also developing social capital. And quite a lot, quite a lot of benefits out of social capital is that we have the access to the information, and having the access to information in this, I would say, in current times, it is crucial, because actually the information, we are packed with the information. If we fall out of that, we also fall out of the society. It is also very important to emphasize that the equity in the distribution of wealth and resources is another critical element of the inclusive society. Here I would also want to that you pay the attention on the difference between the equality and equity. In Slovenia, when we are speaking about the equality, we tend to narrow it just to the equal opportunities or equality in front of the law. But equality has also other dimensions which are very important, and this is also equal treatment. It is also being free of the discrimination and so on. So equality is a much broader sense than just equal opportunities or equality in front of the law, but also the equity politics are also very important. This is what we knew before under the term of discrimination. So we have to give people that are outside of the society and live on the margins of the society additional resources and additional kind of empowerment to be to have the same status in the society as the others, which have all the resources and so on. So I think that equity politics are also quite important. So we have to be careful that on the issue of how the resources are allocated and utilized will significantly affect the actually how the resources are allocated and utilized will significantly affect the orientation of a society, either towards a more integrated, inclusive society, or an exclusive, polarized, and disintegrated. Socioeconomic policies should be geared towards managing equitable distribution and equality in the society. Inclusive policies, instructions, and programs that are sensitive to and cater to the less advantaged and vulnerable needs to be put in place in all areas, sectors, including public health, and effectively implemented. So it is not about just writing the politics and having the good intentions, but also they have to be implemented. Another dimension of inclusive society is tolerance for and appreciation of cultural diversity, more appreciation than the tolerance, I would say. This includes society that celebrates multiple and diverse expression of the identities By celebrating diversity, there is a recognition and affirmation of the difference between and among members of the society, which enables society to move away from labeling, categorizing, and classifying people towards more inclusive policies. The education plays a critical role in all these areas, as it will provide opportunities to learn the history and culture of one's own and other society, which will cultivate the understanding and appreciation of other society, cultures, and religions. Particularly for young people, education provides the opportunity to instill values of respect and appreciation of diversity. At the same time, education can empower those who are marginalized or excluded from participating in discussions and decision making. I would here want to emphasize again that the access of education is not enough, that we have to see all these conditions as a whole. The access to education can only be fully exercised if people live decent lives and have decent living conditions. What is important is also again and again effective leadership, which is crucial to develop for the development of an inclusive society. Where leadership is not a representative of the society, a disconnection between the people and their leaders may eventually result. The most common way of addressing this critical element at the local level is by engaging in open consultation with members of the society about municipal issues such as the budget, and enhancing the free and timely flow of information to citizens and other stakeholders. Here we have some good examples in Slovenia in developing participative part of the participative budget at the municipalities, which is actually decided by people in the municipality by themselves. Some of the cities in Slovenia develop kind of forums, open forums when people can say what they need and what is their vision of the society, and then the cities put part of the budget of what people actually want. And what they are noticing is that in this part of the cities, this part of the municipalities, the social cohesion actually strengthens because people join together and they exchange and so on. And they are also managing to include everyone much better in the communication and so on. This is also very important to know at the university. So how we can engage all the employees and all the students into the common forum in something what we call the university, the community of the university.
Vesna, sorry to interrupt you. We are running out of time.
Yes,
and, yeah.
I'm at the last point, Ivan. Finally, there is also a need to create positive narratives of an inclusive society of the future, and enable each member of the society to share, to understand, and to contribute to those narratives. This is something what I have already emphasized. So here I am, and here I will stop, and I hope you will have some questions and comments later on. Thank you very much for listening.
Vesna, thank you very much as well. This is, as we have heard, a very complex topic for half an hour, but I'm sure we've got quite a good, let's say, overview of the dimensions on social inclusion. Unfortunately, we don't have time now to put questions. These questions are planned for the end of this today's session, and please stay with us till the end. At the end, we can discuss both questions and see what are the things to be reflected on further. We will immediately shift to the next presentation. Our next speaker is Anja Kopač. Anja Kopač actually did her PhD in social inclusion, but the reason I invited her to this workshop is that she served as a Minister of Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities of Slovenia. And she has very rich experiences in politics, so she can really give us first-hand information on what are the political, let's say, accents to be stressed with regard to social inclusion. Anja, the floor is yours, please.
Oh, thank you, Ivan, thank you for the floor. I am pleased to be here today with you. I'm, how to say, I was doing my PhD. I was a minister, but it was quite some long time ago, so I'm really not used to do it anymore. I will try to do it my best. It was really delightful to hear the presentation of Professor Vesna Leskošek. It was give me again this overview about the broadness of the issues and so on. It was nice to hear it very packed in the 30 minutes time. I will just, for this discussion today, I will just give you a short definition of social inclusion so that I am into the concept inside, and then I will go through some figures. And then I was thinking about what is actually the role of university in today's digitalized and more and more polarized world. And I came to the conclusion that it's really important that the university, it's not only about giving students the education itself to place them on the labor market, but actually to think broader and to put the role of university. Do you hear me?
Vam pošljem Liljana za tale.
Okay, so the role of university is actually to give students the role in the society, to be active citizenship, active citizens again, and not to just to be able to critical address the issues around us. So I think it's more important than it was maybe 10 or 20 years ago. So to go on the first slide, I just put some very basic definition. You heard much more about social inclusions by Vesna just before, but for the purpose, social inclusion is defined as the process, as Vesna mentioned it. The process of improving the term of participation in society, particularly for people who are disadvantaged, through enhancing their opportunities, giving them access to resources which they need to be included in the society, to give them voice, that they have voice, that they are heard in the society, and of course to respect their rights, that the rights are not only on the paper, but they are actually delivered in society. We usually talk about 9 principal domains capturing the process of social inclusion. First of all, an important one is employment and work. I heard Vesna that it's of course not enough. In this respect, we have to talk more about the concept of decent work, what is the minimum wage concept, and all the issues related to the flexibility in the labor market nowadays. But I think that we are moving, that the situation is better than it was in 80s, that those questions are more in line if we look about the politics of OECD and these other international institutions. The politics have changed. Before the big financial crisis, it was really difficult to discuss about how important is the issue of minimum wage and regarding to economic system as a whole. But after the financial crisis, I think the OECD adopted it, and in all their documents, you can see that they are pressing for the issue of minimum wage, and the discussion within the EU has also started. We can discuss it, how efficient it is, because within the EU, as you all know, social policy itself is not regarding as being on the same level as economic policy, is still not defined as the policy from this development perspective. It's always somehow discussed under the issues of internal market and the functioning of the internal market. Nothing has changed, even though on the level of talking about it, what are the goals in 2030, but nevertheless the situation is the same or even worse, because the group of countries which sees the rule of EU in this respect regarding social policy to be marginal is growing in amount, and the power of these countries is even is rising. So the situation regarding equal footing economic and social policy is, I can say, nothing much has changed from 2000 or even before. Of course, as Vesna explained, social inclusive society are more cohesive societies. And I would argue that also there is social peace related to this. And from the political perspective, it's also important. This concept of social peace itself is important. That's why the politics itself usually talks about inclusive societies. And that's the truth. We cannot avoid it. We must be all aware of it when you are, as a researcher, you are handling or you want to achieve something on the political level, you have to be aware what are the hinder goals behind. But nevertheless, for Slovenia, as being a small state of 2 million, the cohesiveness of society is even more important for bigger societies. For example, our situation on the labor market today, we have a shortage of labor market. We can say, even you would agree that it's a good situation that we have a shortage of labor market, because they grow in their power with discussion with the employers and the state. But nevertheless, we have shortage, and now the issue of politics is to do everything in their power with the different active labor market policy measures to introduce or to enable all people who are able to work to enter the labor market because of the shortage, because the labor market shortage now is preventing the economic growth. So usually the things are interrelated, and then it's important that now the labor market, the employers have the power through the trade unions to raise their salary, to be able to make a new balance on the labor market. But that is the process. But nevertheless, that means that cohesive society, inclusive society, inclusive labor markets, inclusive society, the whole is really important for a small state as Slovenia it is. To give some figures, because please go, Haris, on the other slide. Thank you. Just to talk, Vesna explained a lot of social exclusion. I think that we have to picture it. In Slovenia case, I put some data regarding the key indicators, you can say. The data are for 2020, and it shows that the risk of poverty rate in Slovenia was 12.4%. The rate of social exclusion was 15% compared to the EU, which was 21.9%. And inequality of income distribution, Gini coefficient, is in Slovenia 23.5, which means that is with the Slovak and Czechs the lowest in the EU. On the other hand, we have Bulgaria. I think it was their percent was 40.8, and Lithuania, Latvia, and Romania with ranking 35 and more. I am more than aware that they are just basic figures, and when we look into the rate of poverty among different groups, there is a huge difference. And in Slovenia, the most problematic group regarding the figures is actually the retired women, which their poverty rate is 22.6%. But so that's just for the outlook of it. Nevertheless, the system of social transfers, benefits and social benefits, without it, the poverty rate would be 22.4%. Without taking into account pensions as well, the risk of poverty in Slovenia would be 39.4%. So the system of social transfers is working. Of course, it could be improved, taking into account that more targeting policies on the issues which are facing the marginalized group should be taken into consideration. As for example, Vesna said before regarding Roma, we have a good public schooling system, but on the other hand, their infrastructure is not allowing them to have to be equally included in the society. There are children without water, electricity, they cannot perform good in the public schools, even though they have access to it, they have an added school teacher to help them and so on. So we have to look on those issues from different domain, and all these issues are multidimensional, as Vesna has said. Nevertheless, also the good data regarding income, inequality of income distribution in Slovenia, we should add that inequality regarding the wealth distribution is growing. So there's the issue of housing in Slovenia. I think that's one of the most disturbing why in 90s we actually privatized the whole housing sector, and afterwards there was not much policies regarding housing in Slovenia. When I was doing the comparison of different policies within welfare states, if we would look housing policy in Slovenia, Slovenia would be welfare system as liberal characteristic, because actually our housing policy is non-existing, and we are doing even worse than the UK or the most liberal welfare states within the EU are doing. So actually there's a big cleavage between generations, because the generation which were working on the working age in the 90s, they were able to buy their flat or house. But now the younger generation is really difficult with the situation on the labor market, and the price of housing in Slovenia is really difficult to solve this problem, which affects all the other areas of their life. So it's important to be addressed as soon as possible. If we continue on the next slide, I just want to, here is the slide regarding what is the share of people at the risk of poverty or social inclusion regarding the socioeconomic characteristics within the EU. I did it because here it's obvious what are the most important factors or socioeconomic characteristic influencing, and still unemployment or exclusion from the labor market is the one which influences poverty of rate mostly. And it's interesting from the perspective, what is our topic today, the education, of course, has really positive effect. Those with high education risk really low poverty rate. Of course, those with lower educational attainment, they risk more of poverty. Data for Slovenia, I looked in 2020, the persons with tertiary education aged 18 plus, their risk at poverty was 4.9%, while those with basic education or less, it was 29.5%. So the educational attainment is the key factor preventing poverty, and we can also say social exclusion in the modern societies. Can you please go on another slide? Here I looked about what is the situation on the EU level regarding the people who attain, who got the tertiary education, and the rate in EU as an average is 40%. So in 2020, people aged between 25 and 34, 40% of them on average completed tertiary education. Slovenia is more or less on the average regarding EU, and you can see that there are countries doing better: Luxembourg, Ireland, Cyprus, Lithuania, Netherlands, France, Sweden, and those with doing much worse: Romania, Italy, Hungary, Czechs, Bulgaria, Croatia. So they are below. It's interesting to see the data which are showing, for example, that those with that 71% of people with higher education, they have 71% higher equalized disposable income than those with lower educational attainment. So it's really important and inclusive factor regarding the how much income people do have during their lifetime. So the role of universities regarding this data is actually more than obvious, that they are the key pillars regarding the labor market performance and how the people have the possibility to include in the society. Of course, to get to university, a lot of preconditions related to social inclusive society should be achieved. So, for example, we were doing in Slovenia some calculations about child benefits, and those from the bottom-up classes. At the end, they usually are only 2 to 3% these children from these families got to the university degree. So actually, the problem of social policy on the level when we talk about social inclusive societies is how we address these poverty traps within the society. In Slovenia, in this respect, we didn't do very, very well. We are still, preventing people to more than 15% of people to drop into poverty, but nevertheless, the differences between poverty rates, the perspectives of people in Slovenia from different regions are worsening. So, and the differences between different regions are rising, which is from the social political point of view really not good. And for having a cohesive society, which was also one of the main goals of Slovenia politics, we are not that much in that direction. So there we need some changes in this respect. So if we say that, of course, there's no doubt that the university, the education itself has really important influence on the educational attainment, and therefore how the people are included in the labor market, what is their position, how they are satisfied with their life, and so on. That's really a huge influence. But nevertheless, I would like, as I said before, I would like to say that I would like to stress also the issue of universities, the importance of universities as the socialization process for students, in the sense of addressing again our core values of our societies. So I think that now universities, it's not only about education and good placement on the labor market, But I think, and I would like to see more about that, universities took their role on socializing students in our core values within the EU. I mean, the importance of human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, rule of law, and human rights. I would like to see that universities have the role to empower students to think critically, to be able to separate between fake and real news, to be aware of their rights, and to assure that they are the voice to protect them. So we are now facing, I don't know, this digitalized world, which is more and more polarized within social media with these bubbles, which we hear only voices that we want to hear. I think that the role of the university as being independent institution within the modern democracy, it's really important that you, as professors, raise those questions and make students think about and be aware of the rights that they were not just given to them, and that we need to all fight for them. Otherwise, we could end up in the society which much more authoritarian way of leadership and narrowing our freedoms and having different look on the basic human rights. So, thank you.
Thank you, Anya. You pointed at some, as we talked before, political aspects of social inclusion, but especially I would like to thank you for pointing at the role of education here as a means towards better social inclusion for, especially for weaker groups of in the society. And the role of universities here is, of course, crucial. As I said before, there is no place or not time for posing questions. And in addition, we have spent our break already. So if you don't mind, I would suggest to continue without a break, because everybody can take a break on its own if it's necessary, since we are on the Zoom. Therefore, I would like to shift immediately to our next presenter. She's Kulbir Shergill from the University of Warwick. Kulbir is our expert in the Utopia on social inclusion, and in addition, I think Kulbir, correct me if I'm wrong, you are the most responsible person at Warwick for social inclusion issues, and you can share with us your first-hand experiences, but especially perhaps you can point at the utopia perspective of social inclusion, why we are dealing with this issue in Utopia as a group of 6 universities. Kulbir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Really nice to see you all here, and some of my colleagues from Work Package 5. It's really nice to see you. So I'm going to talk, I guess it's been a really good 2 speakers laying the groundwork around, what social inclusion means, and what I'd like to do is really to kind of pick up on that and talk about some of the practicalities of how we've put that into place, particularly at Warwick, and how it relates to the work that we're doing in our Work Package 5. So I'm just going to attempt to share my screen with you. So just bear with me 1 second while I do that. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I'm just going to try and get this a bit larger. I seem to. Okay, great. Okay, so as Ivan said, my role at the University of Warwick is about cultural change at the university, because we know that we need to develop a culture which encourages and attracts greater diversity in staff and students, And for that, we know that we need a culture which is inclusive. Why? Because university is a place of innovation, creativity, and thought. We think that these are the characteristics that we need to be a successful university, and ones that we share with our colleagues in our Work Package 5 approach to this. So diversity of thought brings challenge, from which comes innovation and creativity. In the corporate world, the McKinsey consultants, who I'm sure you know of, tell us that diversity on executive teams strengthens financial output by 25% when gender diverse and 36% when ethnically diverse. And the experience of thousands of companies also tells us that we need to pay attention to inclusion, which means valuing people's diversities and creating cultures where they feel that they belong, because people perform better, and that includes our students, when they feel that they belong and that they're valued. So the social inclusion strategy for Warwick and for projects like EUTOPIA are a must. If we're creating a university across borders and cultures, we need to understand and facilitate the benefits of diversity. I know that some colleagues will be sharing later on with you the outputs of the inclusion package. So I said, I'm going to focus on some of the work that we've actually been doing at Warwick. So let me just share with you what our strategy actually looks like, which would be easier if I clicked on right. Okay, so to put simply, at Warwick, this is what our strategy looks like at a really high level. We have 3 key objectives to our strategy: to increase diversity, develop a culture which is inclusive, and to use our voice. And this kind of touches on around some of those issues around political change and social change. That's about using our knowledge and experience to impact with our partners and to influence social change through our own research and our own experience outside of the university. And I'll just come back shortly in terms of what are the actions that we're taking to achieve these objectives. I wanted to just talk very briefly about what the drivers are for social inclusion as well. So in my introduction, I spoke mainly about the innovation and creativity piece, and that diversity of thought, that unlocks the diversity of thought, but there are also other factors which drive us. So these are wanting the best outcomes for our students, which is closely linked to our brand and our reputation. It is also about our values of around equality and respect. We have to also recognize that there are legal requirements which are a driver, which are about both in meeting our obligations under that legal legislation, but also in terms of avoiding litigation. I think we have to recognize that there are negatives that we can also address through this work. And then there are our key stakeholders and our funders. And they also want to work with partners who reflect their own values around equality and their own legal requirements as well. One of our key challenges is to reduce the attainment gap for our students. And we're looking at this by different diversity strands. This slide is just an example of some of the statistics. We see that gap for many different groups of students. We see it by ethnicity, we see it by disability, we see it by faith. And I've just quoted the stat here, which is an average attainment gap for our Black students across the UK. Now, what has been really interesting over the lockdown period, where students have not been in university surroundings, exam conditions have been different, that we have seen a dramatic reduction in the attainment gap for both race and disability. In fact, at Warwick, it's come down to 6% over these last 2 years. Why? It's difficult to say right now, but I think we understand some of those drivers. Could it be the cultural and the physical challenges that face students in the university environment have been removed during this period, and this has helped them to perform better. We don't know, but we're going to be watching very closely to see what happens this year and over the coming year. So back to the inclusion piece. How are we nurturing inclusion, and what does it actually mean to be included? The speakers before me touched on some of this. Now, from my own kind of work and the research that we've done here, when we talk about inclusion in our own strategy, we talk about 4 key elements that we're looking to kind of embed within our culture. So these are the 4 key things that we talk about when we say that people say that they're feeling included: being treated fairly, feeling like they belong, feeling that they are respected, and that they are valued. And I'm going to share with you some of the actions and interventions that we put into place to help us to nurture this feeling of inclusion, and how we're also trying to encourage inclusive behaviours on others' parts, on students and also our staff. And I'd like to just talk you through what so the student life cycle. So we've developed what we are calling an inclusive education model. So when we talk about, so we've taken a 360-degree approach to student life cycle, and we have started to make interventions to improve that student experience. So one of our biggest interventions, and this is very much around the political and the social pieces that speakers have touched on, this is the first piece here around admissions and recruitment, are the scholarships that we provide. We fund students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We also have specific scholarships for students, sanctuary scholarships who are refugees. There are also kind of scholarships which help students who may be underrepresented. For example, we have particular trusts and funds that have been set up for students of Islamic faith because they're particularly underrepresented, and they've been set up by private charities and funds. I also just wanted to draw your attention to the quiet tours as an example of how we support prospective neurodiverse students. So this is students with accessibility issues around autism and Asperger's, for example. So we conduct these tours in a very different way from them. So they're not kind of having to come to university with lots of people where it's going to be very loud and very busy. So we conduct these much quieter tours to give them that opportunity and experience. We also have a really well-established disability team, which is there to specifically support students. And then what happens when our students actually enroll, when they actually arrive at our university, to help our students understand the values and standards of the behaviours that we ask, that we expect. We ask all of our students to undertake training as part of that enrollment. The principles and values in modules here are about understanding what are unacceptable behaviours, mainly around bullying, harassment, and discrimination, all of those things that we talk about that produces exclusion. The active bystanders piece here is about students, if they see or experience any of these, what actions might they take to intervene? And we recently actually piloted a mini version of this by text to our students and staff, because we understand that people want things to be delivered in different ways. And we know that young people and a lot of our staff like to do things on their phones. So we've tried this and it's been really, really popular. And then kind of moving on to what actually kind of happens in the classroom piece, the teaching, the studying, the assessment. We're looking at the content and the culture of the classroom. It's an important part of our inclusive education model. This has partly been built on co-created models with students, which we're looking at decolonising the curriculum. So what we've done is we've built on that, and we're looking at how we can make our content more inclusive and reflective of the diversity of our students. At the same time, it's also important to nurture the classroom culture that is inclusive in the behaviours that are demonstrated and experienced. So that goes back to the initial work that we do with our students. Obviously, we also do that work with our staff, and I'll come to that in a moment. So to ensure that our students are supported during their time with us and complete their studies successfully, we also have in place a number of services to help them to do this. So we have the wellbeing services, which are support around mental health. We have put in place report and support, which is to enable our students to easily report incidents of harassment, bullying, and discrimination and access the support that they might need as a result of that. One of the projects that we've introduced as a pilot, which is called Say My Name, where people can record their names on their emails to help other people pronounce them correctly, understanding that even just sometimes those simple things can make people feel uncomfortable and excluded. And then, of course, graduation is followed by work or postgrad study, and we're actually about to do some research into that journey into postgrad and early research, and also thinking about how do our students engage with future employers. So we have a team that's working specifically around the diversity aspects of that. So the lived experience is all about putting our students at the centre of everything that we do and eliminating that attainment gap. Our staff's understanding of diversity and creating inclusive culture is critical here. This is the glue for us. Staff role models become critical in this, and ensuring that our students are diverse and successful becomes part of the cycle. Students obviously are also our future academic talent as well. So I'm going to, on this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we do with our staff, so taking it through the kind of people life cycle piece. Our reputation and our brand, of course, is important to attract greater diversity. Up to 70% of job seekers in the UK say that diversity in the work profile matters. More than half of young people say that they would hesitate to accept a job in a company that lacks diverse leadership. A new project that we're working on here is with a charity called the EY Foundation. This is just an example of some of the things that we do. It's a charity that supports young people from underprivileged backgrounds or young people who've been in care. This helps them to gain a chance to get some work skills, see the inside of a university, think about studying there or working there, helps to build their confidence. It also helps us to build networks with local communities and our reputation as an employer. And from our very first cohort, which was from last year, one of those young people has now gained a scholarship at the university. In addition to this, you can see that we're working on our recruitment and our promotion processes to make them more inclusive. One example is what we've been doing with our academic promotions. We looked at some of the key barriers. One was the value of different experience. Research versus teaching or administrative tasks. Now, we know that women and ethnic minorities were overrepresented in teaching and administrative posts. So that meant that there was an inbuilt disadvantage instantly because research was much more highly valued than administrative or teaching experience. So we changed that, giving it equal weighting. People also required their head of department's permission if they were going to go for promotion. So what happens if your head of department doesn't approve? We know through lots of research around gender bias, for example, people perceive women as not being ready, they have care responsibilities, they won't want the promotion, so people don't put them forward for promotion. So we took that away. People didn't need to have their head of department approval anymore. And what happened was that we immediately doubled the number of women and ethnic minorities that were promoted that year. So we've continued to build on that. So it's about doing something different. Of course, training and opportunities to discuss diversity issues and how they impact the university are a critical part of helping to raise awareness and educate and engage our staff. Working with our leadership teams has been a real priority. We're also looking at how we can diversify our own talent pool, and we just coming to the end of a pilot program called Inspire, which is a program for leaders who don't fit the traditional image. It's not a typical leadership course. This is about taking on the challenges that women, ethnic minorities, people who identify as LGBT or have a disability face when they're trying to get promoted and get into leadership positions. And then once they're in that leadership position, actually realizing their potential. Because we know that when you're different, even in leadership positions, that spotlight is on you. How do you build your networks? How do you build your resilience? And I'm really pleased to say that actually even before the end of this pilot, 2 of our leaders on that program have actually got a promotion already. So leadership counts. Leaders set the tone, so our work with them has been a priority. So I'm going to just share this last slide with you to finish off, which focuses on the key leadership behaviours that are set out in our strategy. There's the 4 in the centre here around being an ally, not a bystander, understanding diversity and embedding it, nurturing diverse talent, and being respectful and understanding of individuality. And then around the outside, we put the actions, because when we were doing the work with our leaders, they would say, we get it, we want to do the right thing, but I don't know what to do. So we've really been working around actually helping people to understand, what does this actually look like in action? Okay, I'm going to stop there. Hopefully that gives you an understanding of what we're trying to do and some of the issues that we've been looking at in our work package. Okay.
Thank you, Kelbir. I think it's a very interesting presentation of what you are doing at work for the moment. I must say I very much like your approach to life cycle and an inclusive education model, which can be, let's say, a beginning of our joint strategy towards social inclusion at our universities. As I'm saying, there will be time to discuss very soon, but before that, we have another presentation. I hope Jana Javornik is with us already. Hello, Jana. How to present Jana. Jana, I met Jana when she was a student of European social policy analysis about nearly 30 years ago. And at that time, she was a mobile student. So she experienced different university surroundings and experienced different types of inclusion and exclusion. But later on, she has made a very interesting career, being active at the universities, different universities, so she can really share with us rich experiences with how, in terms of how people are accepted or included in different social surroundings inside universities. Apart from that, she has also been Secretary of the State. That's quite another surrounding, another milieu, social milieu. So, Jana, I think we all are looking for hearing your experiences in this respect, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me. And sorry I haven't been able to join you earlier, but what I've heard from my colleagues from work, it does resonate. So I've been invited to speak today about a slightly different topic, and that's kind of my personal experience of being a global academic. However, as a global academic, so be it, I actually do research inclusion in workplace. So obviously, I cannot but talk about that as well. And it's really interesting to see how both the academic and practitioner interest in inclusion has grown since the 1990s. And obviously with public policymakers, campaigners, shareholders, urging institutions and organizations to embrace equality, diversity and inclusion, which we call EDI. So this commitment has resulted in the development and uptake of what we know as diversity management, which is defined broadly as organizational practices. And obviously, EDI is now becoming nearly ubiquitous in organizational statements about ethos, cultures, and strategic thinking. And the popularity of diversity management specifically is attributed to the idea that effectively managing and valuing diversity, as we have learned just now, can leverage individual differences to maximize an organization's productivity and also profitability. So this connection between diversity and an organization's bottom line, including academic, represents a change in management rhetoric that occurred in the early 2000s. Obviously, moving from group-based equality discourses linked to single identity characteristics, for example, gender, sexual orientation, or ethnicity, to one that does expand diversity to include an area of characteristics not associated with law, meaning diversity of thought, lifestyle, and culture. So the diversity of thought, I think my colleagues from Slovenia will resonate with, particularly with the development with the national media. So conceptual clarity between the terms equality and diversity is now well established, and the terms have been decoupled with much of the management literature, closely followed by a stronger linkage between the importance of diversity and inclusion. And the problem is that inclusion has often has been presented as a solution to the downfalls of diversity. So where diversity management hasn't been able to fulfill its promises of increased profitability and productivity. And it's really difficult or relevant to explore and begin to map scholarly research and practitioner engagement with the concept and practice of organizational inclusion. And here, when we talk practitioner, obviously we also talk higher education sector, we also talk academia, we also talk research innovation institutions. Because in an increasingly global society, higher education can create exciting opportunities for international collaboration, such as this one, shared learning, and international staff, also students, obviously, are a key part of this. And their potential to bring different experiences, skills, knowledge, and networks can enrich the local national education and also aid collaboration. However, with this opportunity, obviously, comes increased competition, and higher education institutions need to attract and recruit the best staff to offer high quality research and teaching in a global market. And to do this, we need to ensure that staff not only feel valued and supported, but that our international experiences are respected and utilized to the benefit of the sector. We've seen a really good diagram and of a life cycle approach at Warwick, and a lot of institutions in the UK are following the same path and doing the same. But it's really easy to explain this once the institution has embarked on a journey, but it's relatively difficult to actually practice what we preach. And obviously, my own British institution is no exception, and neither are my Swedish or my Dutch institutions. So we actually do the talk, but we are slightly less successful in doing the actual walk. So improving the experiences of international staff actually means helping to promote the reputation of your higher education sector internationally. It improves the staff experience. It increases the likelihood of attracting, as I've said, the best and most talented staff, but also enables a wider range of research and teaching methods. Again, very often the academia has been characterized as an ivory tower because of its elitism and disconnection with the reality of many communities around the world. And in the case of what we call geosciences, it has been a discipline dominated by white males. And this lack of both racial and ethnic, as well as gender diversity, resulted in many cases in an unwelcoming environment. And to transform such higher education geosciences, it is necessary that all its members act on individual and collective levels to embrace the values of equity and inclusion necessary to create a sense of belonging for everyone. So the first step towards embracing and enacting the values of justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm sure Vesna has already addressed this, is to recognize our own personal biases, which many times remain relatively well hidden or unconscious. And a large part of creating and promoting inclusive climate, including in academia, comes from one's understanding of social inequities that are present in our scientific and work communities and in our society as a whole. So addressing issues related to power dynamics, intersectionality, and privilege is critical to promote positive, productive relationships with both our colleagues and students, but also for creating a safe and respectful both learning and working environment. Quite honestly, with all my international experience, I can say that a culture change is required in academia as a whole to transform our current workplaces into more equitable and inclusive spaces. Obviously, some countries and some institutional settings have come farther than others, and I'm quite sad to report that Slovenia is obviously quite a laggard in that respect. But my own experience in regard to both teaching and research, it's really that my background, because it's so multi-country, multifocal, involves a substantially different system, which does allow me to see and suggest different possible ways to deal with various concerns that people who have grown up only within the various national systems often cannot see. And this is the issue that I think I've come to experience, but also come to deal with in my luxurious position of being Director General of Higher Education. There were opportunities of addressing that as well. One that I've already mentioned is intersectionality. Our societies are very much binary, and it's very much that we see humans as they come, either as white, gender, either as female or male, either as young or old, but we don't see the multi-sectional identities that we bring to our own working and living environment. But there's one thing that I'm not sure whether it's been mentioned before or not, and that's a care chain. Namely, a lot of international staff who work in a university very often care for people overseas, be their elderly parents, be their friends, or however, or different groups. And this is something that the university as an employer can really help with, providing flexible working and leave arrangements. And very often, people who've only lived in one country don't value and appreciate that enough. And we've seen that in Slovenia, that has been pushed forward now with the pandemic wave. But there's still so much room for improvement in providing flexibility to academic life, which is completely different from what the typical public sector employee looks like and work. Also, there are tiny little issues that are not very often considered. And one of those is, for example, as an international, you have visa appointments, you have dates with national authorities. And it's really difficult to understand how the system operates and works unless your employer really does address that. So it's so important for a national employer, in that case, university or a faculty or a school, is to explain the rules of the game and make sure that staff actually are aware of employee benefits, pension schemes. They are notoriously difficult to comprehend. And imagine being mobile and really working across different countries. So in my case, I currently have 4 different employers. So I'm accruing my pension across, so who knows, a dozen countries, and I've no idea how my pension at the end will look like, and no one is there to help me understand it. But obviously that's being in a luxurious position, but there's another one, and that's national holidays. For example, I moved to Sweden one day before the national holiday. No one had told me it was such an important national holiday, and obviously it didn't occur to me to check. I went to the office, no one was there. Started panicking. Gosh, what do I do now? So I called my PI. Where's everybody? Obviously everyone was celebrating the king's birthday, except for me. Another experience that I had as an international who is very often culturally quite ignorant is that also moving to Sweden, I didn't realize that because of the nature and the climate, and I lived really far up north, everyone will be taking holiday in July, which is the only warm month in a year in the northern Sweden. And I planned my holiday for August, and yes, I was there alone. And I know we all kind of long for being in this luxurious position of solitude and isolation, but trust me, being alone in the university, it sucks. So my productivity went down, and obviously the next year I planned accordingly to the natural calendar of Sweden, but no one actually bothered explaining when I moved to Sweden, this is how the locals live their lives. And it's really important, and I can't stress this enough, is to signpost information to international staff. So make sure that they are aware of whatever internal policies on, for example, sickness absence, time off for medical appointments. For example, in Sweden, you can actually go and see your dentist or have a doctoral appointment during your work hours, whereas in Slovenia, it's slightly more challenging to do. So obviously, if you move to Sweden from another culture, another background, organizational practice, you just don't know. But the thing is that you don't know whether, or actually what questions to ask. So unless there's a package ready, waiting for an international staff and prepared by international staff, because trust me, locals aren't the best guides to the locals, then it can really, really be traumatic for some people. And it also, that's my British experience, is a kind of like a catch-22 situation where you need a paycheck for a deposit for accommodation, a bank account in order to be paid, and a permanent address for an address to open a bank account. So where do you start? And what do you get first? And obviously you don't get the salary first, because that only comes after a month of work. So it's really a catch-22 that many people don't really appreciate, because it becomes part of a daily routine. But suggestion is provide banking options, potential difficulties before arrival, and that has so many benefits that your international staff will value. Same applies for Slovenian environment, where internationalization is still slightly more modest than for example, the British system. But I've had to deal with an example of an Iranian student who just couldn't get their bank account up and running. And these are really important messages that a culture, a nation can send across. Needless to mention the Foreign Act that has been introduced recently, and I'm happy to talk more about that later if there's a need. So there are aspects of moving and living across different countries that are localized, and those localized aspects cannot be found through national bodies and organizations. It's not possible to cover everything, obviously, but there are some valuable basics to know. So coming from a very different higher education culture, having worked in Sweden, I was actually thrown in at the deep end in the UK. It was assumed most of the time that I already understood how assessment and research work in the UK, which was of course not always a correct assumption. And I had a very steep learning curve in my first years. And I've had many, many first years because I've worked in so many different institutions internationally. Also, in terms of the UK, I had to adjust my publishing strategy to what we call research excellence framework system, where journal articles are ranked. So in my business school, we have another system within the system that I didn't understand as a sociologist. And obviously book chapters are not valued as highly. So for someone who is on the move and where career is being a portfolio, so one is building a portfolio career, one really needs to understand the rules of the game of the national higher education system. If you are to get the funding, for example, in Sweden, you only have one chance per year. If you miss that one chance per year, another year is gone before you can get another funding opportunity. So all those things really do matter, and they are a crucial part of inclusion for international staff to actually feel a sense of belonging. And that's for me what inclusion is. not only fairness, not only justice, these are relevant for everyone. But when it comes to someone who's an outsider, a sense of belonging is really difficult to establish and develop. So it's really crucial for someone who lives on the go and works on the go is to have interactions with colleagues and also managers. And these are key to a healthy work life, and having a good social network and social opportunities are obviously important for well-being. But when you are no social butterfly who doesn't spend enough time in one place, in one go, then that can be a challenge as well. So I literally, and so there's another aspect, and that's the language. I thought I spoke Swedish. Obviously, I didn't speak Northern Swedish. So I would literally sit in meetings where apparently decisions were taken right in front of me. I did not realize it at all, since they were stated in a very indirect way. And obviously, you can be as fluent in a foreign language as one can possibly be. There are cultural nuances, and there are messages and meanings that are being sent across that people who do not belong to that particular culture or do not understand and know the culture well yet will miss. So it's really important, like for any good manager, to understand, to really check, constantly check that every team member understands what's being agreed upon. And with an international staff, there's an extra layer of complexity, and obviously that's a cultural translation. So my own research highlighted examples that actually range from subtle exclusionary acts. These are very subtle. For example, you'd be in a surrounding with 5 colleagues, and they know you don't speak the local language, and they constantly start talking in a local language because obviously it's simpler for them. But that's a very subtle exclusionary act, or not that subtle at all. So there are also behaviors to avert racism, sexism, xenophobia in a workplace. It happened to me, and I'm white, and I'm a privileged migrant. And it happened to me in Denmark, which is a benchmark for, let's say, inclusive society, where I felt really scared talking in English or any other language because I didn't speak Danish at the time. And that was at the time when the Social Democrats lost for the first time in the Danish history. And I do feel and sense that. So kind of like you built up your own experiences as you move across the world, and it's much easier for you to recognize those critical juncture points, and one of them is obviously happening in both the UK and Slovenia. And hopefully we won't see the demise of that openness and freedom. But something that I also wanted to mention was the conscious and unconscious discrimination and national stereotypes, and these permeate the way staff are perceived by their colleagues and students. And I started migrating very, very early. As Ivan has mentioned, I was a mobile student at the time where there was still Yugoslavia in people's mind. And as I moved towards the West, I've always been identified by others as an Eastern. And probably this is where my research, comparative research, comes from, kind of like debunking the myth of one Eastern Europe. Who knows? But these are subtle stereotypes and the way we are perceived. And institutions should seek to develop an institutional strategy to create an inclusive culture, which could be connected to existing equality and diversity objectives and policies. So for higher education, and this is where I'm going to conclude soon, to operate on a global platform, which it should, people of all nationalities need to be valued and respected, not only by staff members, but also by wider society. So we've seen a really, really horrible, unacceptable tweet by someone who is responsible for national security in Slovenia yesterday, which is a simple act of racism and Islamophobia and sexism and misogyny all in one tweet. And regardless of how welcoming universities in Slovenia are, if the wider society is unacceptable to foreigners, to internationals, it really won't be able to recruit internationally. It won't, because we are the ambassadors of the world, and we do take care of our own, if that makes sense. So the reputation of the sector is salient and reliant not only on good quality research and teaching outputs, and that's very often missed, but also on how it is perceived by staff, by the entire institution, and by the wider society. And this is particularly significant when those staff have large international social networks. So consider that international staff may not report incidents of racism or xenophobia. It hardly ever happens that international staff are reporting that. And as with all staff disclosure of discrimination, they may worry about victimization. They may not know how to report the incident. They may feel that there is no point in reporting it. And they may not have confidence in the reporting process, but also the visa may rely on the job they have. So there's another layer of complexity whenever you work with internationals. And these are issues to take care of and be mindful of. So it's really important. That's my last piece of advice. Analyze staff survey. First make them, then analyze them. And analyze those results by ethnicity and international status to identify any potential trends and differences in experience. And when analyzing promotions, and this is what Kulbir has mentioned earlier, grievance and disciplinary data, analyze all of those by ethnicity and international status. You may be shocked what you find. Obviously, because I live internationally and I live between countries, I have a wonderful teams of colleagues of different nationalities, including British, Slovenes. Actually, at my own university in Leeds, I actually work with another Slovenian fellow, and they're all highly supportive, intelligent, creative, and it's a joy to work with them. And yes, I have felt on a number of occasions, and it has even been said to me that responsibilities and other opportunities for progressing in my career were not available to me because there was the idea that I would not settle here, making investments in me rather useless. And this manifests itself in the management level, but also in casual interactions with colleagues. For example, research grant writing, collaboration, curriculum design, and so on and so forth. So in addition to intersectionality, power dynamics is, and how different people with different levels of power interact with each other in a group setting is really mandatory for us to recognize. And also that relationships in academia inherently are built on power imbalances. And on that note, I'll stop.
Thank you, Jana, for your very valuable first-hand experiences you have shared with us. And also thank you for your critical remarks and recommendations. I think we will put them down and consider what can be done inside our universities. So we have concluded now with the introductory presentations and speeches, and now it's really time to open the discussion. So I would like to invite everybody to enter the discussion. There are two ways to indicate you wish to discuss. One is the chat function that you have on your screen. The other one is just to show yourself on the screen and give a sign that you would like to discuss. So there are two possibilities, and really everybody is invited. Before asking the first one to pose question or to discuss or to with the presenters, I would like once again to ask all the speakers to share presentations with us if you haven't done it yet, but please do that later on in order that we can distribute your presentations to other participants of today's workshop. Yeah, the floor for discussion is open now. Is there somebody who would like to pose a question or maybe disagree with something that was said before? If there is no, I have one question, in fact, which has been put forward by Jana already, namely that, and this is part of my managerial experiences at the university. Universities are traditionally, understood as kind of elite institutions seeking to get the best students, best teachers, best researchers. There's a so-called meritocratic principle very much put forward. On the other hand, when we speak about inclusion, we also come to the weak groups of individuals, not only the diversified, because diversification doesn't mean the same as let's say, that we want to open universities to weaker groups of students, but also staff. And my question is to all the introductory speakers, actually, how would you explain this observation? On one hand, the universities as elite institutions traditionally perceived like that. On the other hand, we now speak about inclusive universities. Do you feel some kind of contradiction between these two concepts, or maybe a kind of a complementarity between the two? I don't know. What's your perception, really? Jana, you put forward this issue already. Maybe you can start, but I would like also to hear other speakers to comment on that.
Thank you. I really like that, and I don't think it's provoked. It's a provocative question at all. But I do think I do have a provocative answer. I think it's really high time for us to redefine what elite actually means, and obviously it can be an elite institution, and Kulbir will probably agree with me, because in the UK we just use that word like a buzzword. We are world leading institution, elite, whatever, and we constantly circle around the concept of elite. But what does it actually mean? And I wouldn't use the term weakness in that respect when it comes to humans. I think it's really about the talent management. It's the talent pipeline. And people have different capabilities. We have different abilities, and we come in different shapes and forms. And obviously we also have different ways in how we arrive at our own result. And if an institution really is meritocratic, then it should start working towards equity, slightly less towards equal opportunities, and actually define what it means by inclusion. So I think what we mean by elite is certainly not a white, male, middle-aged academic, whatever they produce. It's really the quality of an output, and that shouldn't matter who produces that quality product. So it's really about quality, and I don't think we are there yet. I'm talking about even in the UK, and my colleague can step in at any point. We actually have, I think, 3 or 4 different types of institutions ranked by the elite status. And so I think we are really, really far from redefining what elite means, but I think we are doing much better in terms of giving people access and opportunities. Again, it's really about the quality that one brings rather than what they represent.
Thank you. Yeah, Vesna, please.
Yes, thank you. This is for me quite provocative theme, because there is a lot of experiences I have in the sense of what the elite at the University of Ljubljana really means. Because Ljubljana University will never be the same as the Oxford or I don't know, the one of the huge and the elitist and so on, very well known and so on. So what the elite really means at the University of Ljubljana, I would say by my experiences, it is mostly about the hierarchies. Ljubljana University is still very hierarchical institutions with quite a lot of dominance relationships between those that are on the top and those that are newcomers and the early stage researchers and pedagogues and so on. So there is a lot of these hierarchical attitudes, which are actually basically patriarchal, I would say. So it is the traditional, it is much too traditional institution to be open to the diversity and to be open to the inclusiveness and so on. That there is a lot of obstacles at the University of Ljubljana to be that. But I also think that there is a lot of new generation that is coming and is already diverse themselves. So I think that recently we have done the short survey for the gender action plan, and I can easily see that in Ljubljana from the data that there are among the pedagogical staff we have transgender persons. Also among the students we also have people that do not for example identify themselves as males and females, but also quite a lot of persons from the different parts of the world, East and West and so on. So the university is slowly becoming a diverse place, but it is also a question how many steps or how many barriers there are inside the university that everyone will have the equal choices and so on. So this is my perception.
Thank you. I agree that a lot is to be done here. Could be you were mentioned by Jana that maybe you can add something as part as UK universities are concerned.
I hope so. Vesna and Jana have done quite a good job there, actually, picking out the key points. I mean, I do think that the kind of elite label for certain universities is about tradition, and it is about snobbery as well. And it's actually been elite because actually there's been so many barriers around it, which means other people just couldn't get in for a whole variety of reasons. But actually what universities and other organizations are realizing that actually if they really want talent and they want to continue to be innovative and creative, then they need diversity of thought, that actually the same people doing the same things in the same way is actually not productive. So I think there is a kind of realization behind that, and especially for leaders who get it and want to kind of drive that forward. I mean, there are still many who don't and actually see it as a threat, because it means that people like them, they think people like me won't get in. I mean, you know, the automatic reaction quite often if you talk about gender diversity is that men will kind of say, well, does that mean I'm not going to get a promotion? So it's immediately seen as having taken something away. And I think this is where the engagement piece is quite important, that it isn't about taking something away from one person, but actually making it much more open. And it makes the competition stuff, you know, stiffer, harder, you know, for everybody, including them. They just have to work that much harder. It doesn't mean to say they won't get it. So I think there's a lot around engagement and taking the fear away from people around what difference actually means to them and what they might have to do differently as a result of it. But I think a lot of it is about talent. You know, if we want to keep going, we have to have that diversity of thought. We stand still otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. We say sometimes that everybody is talented for something, so we must be able to find talents among students and among those who are employed at universities. Yeah, are there some questions? I don't see any here on the chat screen. Maybe speakers can also address questions to each other if you have.
I'd like to, if I may.
Yeah.
And obviously, my apologies to Anya and Vesna for not being in your, but I still have the questions for you too. So bear with me. You've been around in Slovenia for quite a while in many different roles. You've observed the society, you've actively and critically engaged with the society. Do you think we are getting closer to reconceptualizing inclusion, understanding diversity and equality, both from the policy perspective and both from the scholarly perspective of our society.
Yeah. Anya, would you start?
Are you addressing me or Vesna from the
Both.
political point of view? I think that being under the current government, that we are seeing the concepts of all the sociological concepts in the sense of broad perspective to include all, to have a tolerance for different groups. It's a step behind. So maybe I'm not talking just because I'm from the other side of the political corner, you can say, from the opposite political party. Nevertheless, as a citizen, I see that my freedoms are more narrow than they were, that we speak about, for example, the role of women in society. We get certain benefits for staying at home. So we could ask if there is how the role of women is seen in the today's from the today's point of view. So from this perspective, I see that we are moving more towards the traditional view of role of societies, the different roles of gender roles, from the traditional point of view away from the modern one. So in this respect, all that we're talking about social inclusive societies, that we put in board all the talents, all peoples, that they have different talents, that we put effort to see their efforts and to include them in society. I think that we are a step behind. Also the role of Roma and everything, the punishment policy being ahead, not the policy to prevent, and to see that you can, with the positive attitude, that you can get more out of it. But on the other hand, it's also, I see that we are in a certain point that also all the institutions within the society have to ask themselves if they, in previous decades, that they did enough to claim their professional autonomy. Because for example, I was always quite disappointed that my colleagues from whatever institutions regarding the professional associations, they were mainly about their very particular interests. So I'm seeing those threats which we are facing in Slovene society today regarding the issue of rule of law, the autonomy of universities, the autonomy of public, the RTV and so on. It's always an issue how we will manage to deal with our autonomy and the responsibility on the other hand. So it's all to ask for ourselves to see each other and our institutions in the mirror and to answer on those questions, because just saying that there was even before everything okay, I don't agree. So, but now we are so to the bottom, the race to the bottom, so that we are saying just to have the status as it was before and we will be all glad, but that's not enough. I hope we will, from this bottom, that we will see another level of it. So, yeah.
Vesna, would you like to add something?
I think that Anya was already quite well putting together what is happening. I would just say that probably on the micro level that there are some differences between macro politics and the micro level. So on the micro level, you can also see quite a lot of very good practices of inclusive spaces, for example, and so on. So I would say that that we are living in a funny times, in quite strange times. In a way. So how we embraced it is very good how we embraced, for example, refugees from Ukraine. This is one of the very, very good practices, but at the same time we cannot neglect how actually awful we are treating other refugees which are not from Ukraine. But I hope that actually what is happening now with these opening spaces for Ukrainians, that this will also somehow have the impact on the other groups of the refugees. So that we will not be, that the society will not be such a black and white space. Yeah, so we will see, yes.
Thank you. I think we are coming to the end of our today's meeting, our today's workshop. It would be time to make conclusions, which I'm not able to make in a very good way. But nevertheless, I would say that you have rightly pointed at the fact that our societies are getting more and more diverse, and if we want to prosper as societies and also as a European society, we will have to pay attention much more to the diverse groups of people, but also to the individuals being diverse themselves. Everybody is a special case, so to speak, every student, every employee. And universities, as very important agents of development, must take a lead here, I think. And this is in fact the effort we are making also within EUTOPIA and our work package 5, focused on inclusion. So pay attention to diversity, but also try to be inclusive as much as possible, to include all the potentials people bring with them. This would be my closing words for today. Thank you very much to all the speakers and your very interesting presentations. Thank you to all other participants as well. We continue tomorrow with our second part of this workshop, which will be very interesting because there will be other cases of universities presented with respect to a specific case of one student. I think this will be very interesting discussion, and please do not miss it. See you tomorrow. Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.